Before we begin, think twice about whether you want to keep watching, because what you're about to hear is not just a horror story. It's a piece of history soaked in blood. If you still decide to stay, then welcome to the legend of Sawney Bean, a name that haunted Scotland for centuries. He wasn't a demon from hell nor a creature from the dark. He was a man born human, but something inside him was broken. And from that brokenness came hunger. A hunger that would turn into something far worse. Sawney Bean was born in East Lothian, Scotland in the early 1400s, a harsh, unforgiving time where the poor stayed poor, and survival meant working yourself to the bone. His father was a simple man, a ditch digger, trimming hedges and digging soil for nobles. But young Sawney despised that life. He hated the cold mornings, the aching hands, the feeling of being invisible in a world ruled by the rich. He wanted more, but he didn't want to work for it. In his eyes, hard labor was for fools. So one night, without saying goodbye, he left his home behind and disappeared into the foggy countryside. That was the moment the man named Sawney Bean was truly born. Not a worker, not a farmer, but a predator in search of his next meal. During his wandering, he met Agnes Black Douglas, a woman as twisted as he was. People whispered she was a witch. Maybe she wasn't, but there was something unholy about her. The way she looked at people as if they were prey. She believed the world was unfair, that good people starved while the cruel ones feasted. When she met Sawney, it was like two pieces of evil finally clicked together. They shared the same rage, the same thirst for revenge on life itself. Together they swore an oath, to live for themselves, take what they wanted, and if the world denied them, they would take it by force. And so the two outcasts became one shadow, and that shadow began to grow darker. At first they survived by stealing, a loaf of bread, a few coins, a horse left untied. But greed grows fast when it's never punished. They started robbing travelers on lonely roads. At night in the thick fog, a hand would reach out from the dark. And someone would never make it home again. Soon stealing wasn't enough, because with each kill came a thrill, the pounding of the heart, the smell of fear, the silence afterward. The first time they killed, they felt guilty for an hour. The second time, a minute. The third time, nothing. They realized something terrible. Killing was easy, addictive, liberating, and so their life as murderers began. Years passed as they drifted, always escaping the law, until one day, fate led them to the coast near Benani Head. There, hidden among the cliffs, they found a cave. It stretched nearly 200 meters deep, with tunnels twisting like veins through the rock. And most strange of all, during high tide, the entrance disappeared beneath the sea. By night, when the water fell, it opened wide like a hungry mouth. They knew instantly this place was meant for them. They moved in, bringing what little they had. Inside, the cave was dark, cold, silent, but safe. Hidden, perfect. At first, they used it as a hideout after robberies. As the days turned into weeks, the couple realized they had found something more than a hideout. They had found a nest. By day, they slept deep inside the darkness, listening to the waves pounding above their heads. By night, they crept out like shadows, hunting travelers who strayed too far from the road. The nights of Scotland were cold, and the fog was thick enough to choke a man. That fog became their ally. Screams could vanish into it and no one would ever hear. They grew bolder, more savage. They took jewelry, weapons, and food, but soon something else. When they had nothing to eat, Sawney looked at the body of a man they'd killed, and an idea came to him. An idea so horrifying even Agnes hesitated. But hunger can twist the mind. And that night, they crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They cooked the flesh of their victim, telling themselves it was survival. But in truth that it was pleasure. The first taste of human flesh. The beginning of a nightmare that would last 25 years. Years passed. Seasons blurred into darkness, and within that cave life began to breed its own curse. Agnes gave birth again and again. 8 sons, 6 daughters, each child arriving into a world that had never seen sunlight. Their first breath was of damp salt air, their lullaby the growl of the ocean. They never knew laughter, only whispers, and the sound of bones cracking in the firelight. Sawney Bean became their teacher, their god, and their law. He taught them that the world beyond the cave was evil, that outsiders were nothing but prey. If they were hungry, they killed. If they were tired, they slept among corpses. Mercy was a word they never learned, but as the children grew, something darker began. Cut off from the world, there was no one else to find, no one else to love, no one else to fear. The line between family and flesh blurred like blood in water. Sawney, obsessed with keeping his secret pure, forbade them from ever stepping beyond the cave. If they wanted companionship, it had to come from one another. And so, in the silence of that stone womb, he created something unthinkable. A cycle of blood that fed upon itself. Children bore children. Brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, all bound in a web of control and madness. Each new life was weaker than the last, yet crueler, hungrier, more animal. They grew pale, their eyes wide like rats in the dark. Their language became snarls, their laughter, a sound no human throat should make. And still the family grew, 48 souls, all born in that cursed pit, raised to hunt, to devour, to obey. They called Sawney father, but in truth, he was something else, the seed of a disease that could no longer be cured. And when night fell over Scotland, his children crept out one by one, their feet bare against the rocks, their teeth sharp with hunger, ready to feed the only way they'd ever known. Inside that cave, humanity died, and monsters took its place. The Bean Clan ruled the night. They attacked travelers, tore them apart, and carried the remains back to the cave. Some they kept alive, especially women, young and terrified. They became slaves, forced to serve, forced to bear children. When they resisted, they were starved until their minds broke. Some were forced to eat flesh to survive. Once they did, there was no going back. The Bean Clan laughed as they watched fear turn to madness. Those who refused were butchered. Those who obeyed lived a little longer. Inside the cave, barrels of salted meat lined the walls, bones piled high like trophies. The air reeked of rot and smoke. And through it all, the sound of laughter, inhuman, echoing, endless. For 25 years, the Bean Clan hunted without mercy. Villages vanished overnight. Merchants disappeared on the road. Bodies washed ashore, limbs chewed to the bone. Locals whispered of monsters, but no one dared to go near the coast. The king's soldiers searched for wild animals, never imagining the true beasts were human. By day the cave was sealed by the tide. By night it opened to let the hunters out. Sawney Bean had become a ghost story, a name parents used to frighten children. "Don't wander too far," they'd say, "or the beans will find you." And every night he did, but evil always makes mistakes. One night, the beans attacked a newlywed couple traveling home from a fair. The husband was a soldier, hardened by war. He fought back fiercely, killing several of them, but his wife fell, an arrow through her chest. Heartbroken, he followed them in secret, watching as they dragged her body into the cave. He saw the truth, the flicker of torches, the shadows of men carrying flesh. He rode through the night and told the authorities everything. When King James VI heard the story, he was furious. He sent 400 soldiers and bloodhounds, led by the grieving husband. They waited for the tide to fall, and when it did, the black mouth of the cave opened. The soldiers marched into the dark. What they found inside would scar their minds forever. Heads hung from the ceiling. Limbs floated in barrels of salt. Bones covered the ground. And in the center stood the Bean family, Men, women, and children snarling like animals. The fight was brutal but short. Within an hour, all were captured. Dragged into daylight for the first time, they screamed as the sun burned their pale skin. There was no trial, no mercy. The men were mutilated, then hanged until dead. Before dying, Sawney Bean shouted his final curse, "It's not over, and it will never be over." The women were burned alive, their screams echoing across the sky. Rumor says one daughter escaped. She changed her name, lived in a nearby village. But when her bloodline was discovered, they hanged her from a tree, the one still called the Hairy Tree. The cave still stands today, cold and silent, carved into the cliffs of Benane Head. Tourists visit, but some say they hear whispers, footsteps, laughter, as if the Bean Clan never truly left. So remember, if you ever think of getting rich without working for it, there's only one path that leads there. The path of greed, the path of blood. Sawney Bean found his paradise, but it was built on the bones of 1,000 souls. In the end, evil always devours itself. And what begins as hunger always ends in hell.